Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today we're coloring with Color Burst. Ken Oliver's Color Burst is a super concentrated microfine powder colorant, and it's a really fun way to color in your stamped images and get a pretty watercolor effect. So you can see here my flower has been colored with yellow and green Color Burst. I've stamped the flower and then heat embossed it so that it has some texture and a little bit of shine, plus the raised edges help to hold in my watery medium. It's a really easy technique to do, so let's take a look at the process. I'll move aside my Color Burst and my card, and we'll start with the stamps that I'm working with. So you can see here, this is from the Eclectica line from PaperArtsy. This is the ELB20 stamp set, designed by the amazingly talented Lynn Brown. And Lynn has actually designed this flower image that I'm working with in two parts, so the bottom part as well as the top part, so that they're meant to be used separately or together or interchangeably, which is really nice. So I'm going to stamp and emboss this in a two-part process. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to move the stamps aside and bring in my plain white matte cardstock. So this is not a glossy or coated cardstock. And I've got my stamps on two separate blocks. This is just going to make it a little bit easier for me to do the stamping and embossing. Of course, I also need to have my embossing ink pad, and I'm working with a Versamark, and my embossing powder. And the embossing powder I'm using is from Wow Embossing. And this is the Chocolate Caramel Pearl Regular. It's a beautiful, beautiful kind of burgundy, coppery brown color. It's just fantastic. So I'm going to have all of these elements on hand ready to do my embossing. So let me set aside this part and get my embossing powder at the ready. So what I need to do is just take my embossing ink pad and ink up the bottom portion of my stamp. Make sure that that's really well inked. This is a clear ink, so it's a little bit hard to see, especially when I stamp this down. You won't see anything on here, of course, until I add the embossing powder, and I'm just going to sprinkle this right on here, and then take a piece of scrap cardstock, and I'm just going to tap off the excess. So now I can see where my bottom portion is on there. And then what I can do is repeat the process with the top portion of the botanical image. So I'm going to ink up that top part, again with the Versamark, and then I'm going to position it right to the top of that stalk, and then once again sprinkle with the embossing powder. And you can be really generous when you're sprinkling on that embossing powder, because the reason that I'm putting this all back into this scrap piece of paper is so that I can funnel the scrap paper and the embossing powder right back into the jar. Now you'll notice on here I have a lot of area that has some stray embossing powder. I just take a dry, fluffy paintbrush and kind of come along and get in all of that excess embossing powder. Kind of tap off the side there too, so that I don't have any stray bits of embossing powder on there. And then all I need to do is heat set this, and I'm ready to color. Now my heat embossing is done, and I wanted to show you just that beautiful soft shimmer and shine that you're able to get with that gorgeous embossing powder. This is going to provide a really pretty extra touch onto my card. Now the raised edges of the embossing are also going to help to hold in the watery medium that I'm going to create with my Color Burst. So I'm going to move aside my stamped image just for now and mix up my two Color Burst colors with a little bit of water to turn them into that medium. So I'm working with the Yellow Ochre and also the Terra Verte, and these are both from the Earth Tones collection. So all I need to do is put a little tiny touch of each one of these colors onto my craft sheet. And yes, this is all you need to do. Remember, I said it is super, super concentrated. So that's the Terra Verte, and then this is the Yellow Ochre. So I'm going to put this right down next to it in a separate place. And I'm working, of course, onto a craft sheet. This is from Ken Oliver as well, and it's just a nice non-porous surface. It's going to protect my work area, and it's also going to serve as my palette. So now what I need to do is just put a little bit of water next to each one of these puddles of color, and then I can start mixing them up. So I'm working with a really small paintbrush here. I'm going to mix up my yellow first, actually, because I want to start with the yellow. So I need to mix this up, And I might actually add a little bit of more water on there to get a brighter color. But this is a nice soft yellow, and this is going to be perfect for my flower. So all I need to do is just use the paintbrush to paint in my stamped and embossed image. Now you'll notice that I'm not being too terribly careful. I'm going over all of those stamped and embossed edges, which is okay because the heat embossing is going to create a resist, and everything will be sort of held within the edges of my heat embossing. So it doesn't matter if I go over some of these edges here. The powder, the melted powder, will resist my watery medium, which is why I like doing this. So there I've got my flower all colored in. I'm going to dab off my paintbrush, and then I'm going to come in with a separate brush. This is actually a water brush. I just don't have the barrel filled. I'm using it as a paintbrush. And I'm going to mix up my green. This is the Terra Verte. And then I'm going to come along here and just sketchily paint in and along the leaves and the branches. So I like to kind of trace along here. You don't have to be too perfect. Lynn has designed these stamps with a really sort of forgiving aspect to them. They do have a really nice kind of hand carved effect to them, which means that you don't have to make this entirely perfect, which is great. I like that aspect of it. So I'm just going to gently color in here. I'm going to dab off my brush, and I might want to also add just a little bit of the yellow to some of the tops of the leaves and the branches in here, and just give a little bit of a different color. So now I have my image all colored in. The finishing touch that I really like to do is add a bit of a spattered effect. So I'm going to pick up some of that watery yellow, pick up a tiny bit of the green as well, and I've got it loaded onto my brush. I'm going to hold the brush a couple of inches away from the surface of my stamped image, and I'm going to tap the barrel with my hand. And that is going to give me a really fun spattery effect. And it really goes along with that sort of handmade, hand-carved effect of the stamped image itself. So I think you can see some of that spattering on there. You can do as much or as little as you want. Then you just need to let the entire piece dry. Now if you want to, once it's dry, go back and add more depth and color along, especially on the flowers. Maybe go around where some of the edges are more highlighted. You can certainly do that too. Just keep your color wet on your palette, and you can come back in and use it as much as you want to. Because of course you've got a nice little puddle. This is going to go a long way. So now that I've got this drying, I'm going to bring back in my original card and just talk about how I put this together. So as you can see on here, I've matted this up onto a medium green cardstock, just added a little strip of brown cardstock here, and then the base of my card is a really fun light bright lime green. Now you can see on here I've also just added 3 little self-adhesive rhinestones in the center there. Just a nice little finishing touch that I think matches nicely with the beautiful heat embossing and that overall painted effect. So this is how you can use Color Burst to color in your stamped images. I hope you enjoyed today's show. For more ideas and inspiration, please do stop by my website at saranaumann.com. If you enjoyed today's video, I invite you to subscribe to Studio SN on YouTube, and I'll keep you updated with a new video at the first of every month. Thank you so much for joining me on Studio SN, and I'll see you again next time.